Well, here we are at the end of another AFL season. My name is Brett from the Fremantle Dockers Media Team. And if you're watching this on our Doig Medal live stream, hope you're enjoying the count so far. We're about to get into the juicy part where we tally the votes. We find out who will be crowned the 2022 Doig medalist. My money's on Andy Brayshaw, but I don't think that's too far of a stretch to predict. But joining me for the next 20 minutes or so, you'll know this man from the Final Siren podcast. He's one half of the Purple Rain podcast duo as well. But Oz, great to have you with us today.
Yep, lovely to be here. The poorer half, but that's okay. Like many Freo supporters riding the wave of 2022, really enjoyed the season and especially finals and being over there at the MCG and seeing the Purple Army in force. So it's fantastic and lovely to be here.
Well, it's good that you're here. Your mate Duck is abroad in the US today. How's he going? You heard from him?
Yeah, he's living the dream as well. He's in the second happiest place on earth at Disney, I think. The first, obviously, is here at the Doig.
Correct.
So, but he's very much enjoying his time, and hopefully we've got some snaps that we might be able to put up.
I think we should. Good to have you with us, Oz, but we do also need to welcome in the big boss,
yes,
the Chief Executive Officer of the Fremantle Dockers, Simon Garlick, is with us. Hello, Gallo.
G'day, Brett. G'day, Oz. Thanks for having me on. I've been waiting for this call up for a number of years now. Slightly disappointed it's taken this long, but I'll overcome that to do my best to create some sort of enjoyment.
Try and forgive us. We're here to chat through the 2022 AFL season that was a year of excitement, of finals, Freo finals footy, and the emergence of some young stars. Gallo, I wanted to start with our 2022 performance as a whole, just taking stock, how you felt it stacked up against expectations heading in.
Yeah, I think like everyone I think would have seen, it's been a year of progress for us. There's been development, there's been growth. If you had said at the start of the year that we would have played a final and won one at home and obviously got to the second week, most people probably would have taken it. The thing about it is once you get there, you want to keep going. And we didn't have any limitations on what season 2022 might have had for us and thought we had the game plan and the capability to continue going. So there was that obvious disappointment. But objectively, when you look back, 15.5 home and away wins, 7.5 interstate wins, development of a number of our players to have career best years, Andy's year that we all know about. And as you said, clearly a favourite. You went out on a limb there, Brett, suggesting that he might win the Doig. All-Australian, Coxie in the All-Australian squad, 3 Rising Star nominations, 4 in the 22 from 22. So there's clearly a year of development and growth, which we're pleased with, but not content or satisfied. I think, it's another building block for us, but there's no guarantee that it's going to continue in that sort of fashion. So back at work now, everyone's pretty enthusiastic and we've got a driven group to go better again next year.
Look, every successful organisation has a bold strategic plan, vision, a mission, if you will. And no secret that Freo's strategic plan, very bold. And a couple of things you've got in there, obviously, what everyone knows, which is by 2025 to get that magical chip for both the men and the women. Yep. But I thought I'd quickly touch on the members and fans. And I noticed the 80,000 members by 2025 and 50,000 average attendance. Yep. And I'm not sure if you probably would be across this, yes, but one of the stats that came up was that in 2022 we have 56,000 members and an average attendance of 72% of those members, which is the highest in the AFL. So clearly kicking goals there. How do we get that to 80K and how do we push that to 50?
I'm glad you said I might be across that. I probably should be, to be frank. If I'm not, there's some concerns. Yeah, we've landed at a reported membership number of 56,105 to be exact, which is a club record and really pleasing progress, but there's still a gap between that number and the 80,000, which is our aspiration and aim. We made a bit of progress in both that and the crowd attendance, as you mentioned. So we were the 4th highest average crowd attendance club for the year. So behind, from memory, Collingwood, Richmond, and Brett, help me out here.
You told us that you know this.
Yes, Collingwood, Richmond, and Carlton. Was the 3rd. So obviously big traditional clubs with 80 to 100,000 members. So for us to be 4th on that list is really significant and progression. So we'd like to keep that spot or improve it if we can over time. We're continuing. The on-field progress will be our biggest determinant of hitting that 80,000 mark. There's no doubt about that. But we do a whole bunch of other things that our members listening to this would understand, and we want to keep engaging them. The content that we provide through the Duck and Oz show, a whole bunch of other platforms, and the work that we do tries to ensure that our members are across everything that's happening in our club at all time and feel like they're incredibly engaged to it. It's important from that perspective. One of our anchors is connection, so that we connect with our fans, our members, prospective members and the like. We've still got a capacity. 40,000 average crowd is great, but there's still some room in our stadium as well too, which is exciting. So a lot of plans about how we can improve that, not just through the on-field progression as well.
Perhaps the greatest display of that passion and attendance from the fans was that elimination final victory over the Bulldogs. Such a special day in front of that noise, bringing the finals football back to the Purple Army. Just from your perspective, how do you reflect on that day, the comeback in itself and the result, and be able to send off Dave in his final game at Optus Stadium? It was just one of those days that had everything.
Yeah, it was a magic day on a bunch of fronts. Quarter time, we probably weren't feeling it at that stage, Brett. But I think that encapsulated the promise and the potential that this club has that day overall. I'm a relatively new member of the Purple Army, 3 years into my stint as CEO, and consider myself incredibly fortunate to be so. When I look back on what I saw as a club prior to joining the organisation, I saw a club of incredible promise. Before this year, we hadn't made finals for 6 years running, yet we have a base of members, if you like, at 50,000 a year each of those years. Unbelievably passionate supporter base, incredibly loyal, committed through that period of COVID, just did so much for our organisation. And then when you start to deliver a bit of consistency and performance on field, what we saw, I think, in that elimination final was a snapshot of what's to come, as long as we hold up our end of the bargain and continue to improve. The noise at Optus Stadium was like nothing I saw. I mean, obviously for a crowd just shy of 60,000, there would have been 55, 56 of them, all part of the Purple Army. Sonny kicks that first goal. We start to get a move on. Jai, just after the halftime siren, puts us to within a couple of goals. We know we've got the best stadium in the world. We know we've got the best supporter base in the world, and that started to give us a bit of a feel for what we can become.
Nice. And look, no surprises seeing Craig McRae win the Coach of the Year, but having said that, many people had Justin Longmuir in that conversation. So how have you seen his growth in the role since he took over in 2020?
Yeah, I think it's been a continued progression for JL, but just as importantly, his whole coaching staff. I think we're really fortunate as a club to have not only an up-and-coming, highly credentialed, highly technical, capable, brilliant relationship manager as a senior coach, but we've also got a fantastic coaching group as well. Jamie Graham's really well regarded, as we know, doing some fantastic stuff with our forwards. Joel Corey's going to move into our midfield coach next year, who has a remarkable ability to teach the game and the craft of what it is to be a midfielder. Matthew Boyd, obviously we know his record, know his connection to JL and what he's done in the game, but he's doing with our backline as well too. So when you look at it as a totality, we've got a group that has no ego, puts the club first at all time, but is highly capable. What we're seeing with JL is continued progression. Our members and fans who listen to this podcast would listen to him after games. He breaks the game down incredibly well, succinct. He's incredibly supportive of his playing group, but also calls it out when we haven't performed to the expectations, and he's incredibly authentic and genuine. So great year for JL. He'd be the first to say progression, but not content, just as we all are. So he's going along really well.
Well, as we touched on, Andy Brayshaw, one of those favourite candidates for tonight's Doig Medal. We sat down with the midfield gun recently for a look back at the season that was. Let's hear from Andy.
I've been proud of what the boys could achieve. I think if you had told me at the start of the year that we were going to win a final and be playing in September, I would have been really happy with that. So yeah, proud of some of the growth from some of my teammates, and yeah, also happy with my consistency this year as well.
Brayshaw's been brilliant in this turn. Kicks to full forward. Amos!
Obviously we wanted to go all the way and win the premiership this year, and there's no real easy way to sort of exit the season unless you win it. I think from the experience, I think we went into that first final with only having 4 players who have played in finals, and now all of us have that 2-game experience of playing in front of 60,000 at Optus and then 90,000 at the G. I think that's sort of priceless, and we'll definitely take that experience going forward next year.
He's been the man they turn to. What a great sight that is.
Dave's not only such a good player, but he's probably our main leader in there and has been this year. It'll probably hit hard when we get back to pre-season and he's not there and we have to start picking up that slack, but he's definitely going to leave a big hole in the team. Yeah, there'll be blokes training really hard all off-season, all pre-season to try and take Dave's spot. So it is really exciting, and we've got such a young group that we're just going to try and keep building.
Chance for Sarong. Can he find that left boot of his and kick the goal? Yes, sir!
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to play with Fifey and Dave, Lockie Neal earlier on in my career, and now I've got Caleb side by side with me, and we can get to work against any opponent. We definitely push each other every week. We're just really driven to be the best we can be, and I think we've both really benefited from having each other in the side. Yeah, Moose has been acting skipper for the year, and he's done an amazing job, and he's sort of someone who leads by example and never takes backward steps. So when you see him doing the things he does on the field, you can't help but try and do your bit for the team as well. 60,000 we had at Optus almost sounded louder than the 90,000 Collingwood had at the G. So we want that to be sort of our fortress, and when we have all the fans out there cheering for us at every opportunity, it feels like we've got a bit more of a leg to stand on and feel a bit stronger every time we go out there. So yeah, I'm very keen to get back.
All right, we're back, and this is clearly a pre-recorded show, broadcast halfway through the Doig Medal live stream. So let's touch on a few points of what's happened so far in the medal count. Andy Brayshaw leading at this stage with Sam Switkowski, Brandon Cox, a great count so far, and as expected, Andy off to a flyer.
Yeah, no surprise. He's had a phenomenal year on a whole number of counts, reflected in some of the postseason awards. Winning the MVP at his age is significant, and we know what he's doing on the field, but off the field as well too. We couldn't be more pleased, and are very fortunate to have him as part of our club. And then Switter and Coxie are probably names outside of our club and our supporter base. Our supporter base would know them incredibly well and hold them in high regards, but on the East Coast perhaps, or the broader football fraternity might not know them as well, but just get the job done. Selfless, team first sort of players, and we're starting to see them come out from a talent point of view.
And Switter's just been named best clubman. Before we go to you, Oz, I know you're a big fan of Switter. A great year. You can hear from that sound.
Yes. Unusual sound.
But a great year from Switter on and off the field. Yeah, I know you love him.
Oh yeah, it's all about role playing and playing your role to perfection, and he is the epitome of that, and just what he's able to bring to the team, and pressure efforts, and just the ability to get in and amongst it. I think high character as well, and just really brings that high energy as well. So not surprised, and happy for the young man.
Internally, we do talk about our PBAs, purpose, vision, and anchors, and in a lot of what you we've touched on already, Sam fits into those molds as well, doesn't he?
Yeah, when you work through them as team first, authentic, heart, best self, connection. There's not one that he doesn't tick in that sense. And, we work through those, as you know, Brett, from a club point of view, and they're really important to us from a day-to-day perspective. So when you think about it in that sense, the strong crush that Oz obviously has on Twitter is well-founded.
Healthy. And look, this time of year has been, in recent years anyway, probably for the Purple Reign, the time to shine, where we really start getting excited about trade period. And yet again, we see Fremantle at the centre of the trade period, and for better or for worse. How important is the next fortnight going to be, and how do you see it playing out?
Yeah, well, it's huge. Often people might look at it from an importance perspective towards the next season, but it can really set up your tilt, your overall approach to hopefully winning a premiership. Our members and fans will be sick of me talking about a sustained run of contending, but that's what we're looking to do. Clearly, as I mentioned before, there was no limit on 2022, and there certainly won't be on 2023 in terms of what we might be able to achieve. But there's precedents of clubs, and we've just seen one, probably the best example, win a premiership in Geelong, who continually put themselves in a position to play in prelims, top 8, top 6 positions, which is clearly a strong formula to follow. So that's a focus for us. we've long held, particularly for the last 3 or 4 years, that real philosophy of going to the draft, but also making sure you're prepared and you've done the work for when opportunities provide it. And we saw that last year. We were able to bring Will and pick 19, which has ended up with Matthew Johnson, who we think incredibly highly of. Jordan Clark came into the club last year as well too. So whilst draft has been our overriding principle, we're certainly very much of a mind to making sure that we're ready to go when opportunities provide.
And look, can't hide away from the fact that a number of players have requested a trade away from the club. And I guess for many supporters, this might start looking at alarm bells, reasons why, etc. Is there anything you can say to the members and supporters who are concerned?
Yeah, I'd certainly encourage them not to be concerned at all. I mean, it's a bit of the way of the modern game in that aspect. We've had 2 players who are out of contract who've requested a trade, which is well within their prerogative, and we understand that. Disappointing in the sense that both players in Blake and Griff had fantastic years, probably the best years they've had in their career. So clearly the environment that we created was fantastic and worked for them in that sense. For one reason or another, they've decided to, which is, as I said before, is completely up to them. So, much like the situation we had previously with Adam Chera, we'll just look to make sure we capitalise on that scenario in the manner that suits the club as best as we possibly can. So we understand this occurs from time to time. There's a number of other players who are within contract who are looking at their options. And again, we'll work through that with the best interests of the club in mind.
And look, last question for me on the trades. What's your role with trades and drafts? Do you leave it to Wolsey and Belly, or do you sort of get in there and give some advice and maybe put the foot down, or I don't know?
Yeah, look, Belly and Wolsey and the entire list management recruiting team, clearly we're really pleased with. My role, and as it is in any other area of the club, is to make sure it's functioning as well as it possibly can. And from that perspective, and it's worth our members and fans knowing, the amount of work that Wolsey and his team do is, I'd suggest it's unsurpassed in the AFL. And when you look at process and systems, the amount of viewings that they do, the sheer load of content that they consume to make sure we're making the best decisions we can is exactly where it should be. So I'm obviously well across that. And then I'm absolutely across any significant decisions that we make. But I'd never come in and override a draft position, for instance, and a decision to be made, because that's what we employ David Walls for. We think really highly of him in that regard. And the final decision in that aspect goes to him. Clearly, I will prosecute and I'll be involved in a lot of discussions and asking questions and testing things, but very, very comfortable with the capability and capacity of the guys doing that job.
And while we're here to celebrate our men's season and how incredible it was, we are in the full swing of the AFLW season. I can't believe we're over halfway already. A tough
second AFLW season.
Second, 2022 Part B.
Yep.
A tough start to the year for the girls, but a really impressive RSC Derby victory to get that momentum back. How are you finding the women's season so far?
Yeah, as you said, mate, really pleased that they were able to get the result, because it's been a culmination of a lot of hard work. We've had our challenges this year, there's no doubt. Obviously, lost a couple of really senior and significant players with the expansion, which was unfortunate and disappointing. And then coupled with that, some of our most important and significant senior players were crippled by injury just before the season starting. And even a few of them coming back who played round one, just a bit off from a fitness point of view. But we're building slowly. And I think the exciting thing from our point of view, and we saw a lot of it last year with the likes of Anya, who was playing her first real season, Dana East, Tux, Airlie, a whole bunch of players came into the program and had an immediate impact, but are starting to build in their careers because they're young. You're incredibly disappointed for Michaela, who got injured and was showing so much X factor and capability, but she'll be back next year bigger and better than ever. And I think again this year, with some of the fresh blood that we were sort of forced to give opportunities to early in the year, are going to benefit so much from it in the long run. But having said that, clearly with the win last week, obviously a strong performance against Carlton without being able to get it done in the end, shapes up for a big second half of the year. So W program's so important to us. They're building again and can't wait to see what the second half brings.
And just briefly on Hayley Miller, it was an almost must-win game last weekend, and she dragged us over the line, won that, what I like to call the Carabao's medal for best on ground. But ever since taking on that captaincy, she's just gone to a whole nother level.
Yeah, Hayley's phenomenal character. We talked about Switter before and made reference to Andy. And you talk about club anchors, and you can tick all those off with Hayley as well too. So capability-wise and her ability to play the game is now unquestioned. I think she's in the absolute upper echelon elite of the competition. She showed that last year. And you throw her leadership capability and her ability to bring her teammates along with her, and we've got a pretty special player there.
Well, as we wrap on this 2022 little look back, we're going to throw to some content captured a few weeks back at our Power of Sport luncheon. Bob Murphy, Peter Bell took to the stage for a chat on their footy journeys, their day-to-day life of footy operations, which is an exciting one, as you know.
Very sexy.
So sexy. You can make that noise if you like before. Before we cross to that, though, Simon, you played a significant part in the early career of a young, skinny Bob Murphy. You would remember, say, his debut game for the Bulldogs. You were his teammate that day.
Yes, I do.
You
remember
do?
that game. Yeah, just slightly. It was.
How many goals?
It was a good win. I can't remember exactly. There might have been, 6 maybe.
Yeah. So 6 goals for the CEO in that day.
Yeah, it was a rare day out for me, Brett, and I'm glad you followed the script. I said I'd only come on this podcast if that question was entered in, so I very much appreciate that. No, it was actually a really special day. We had a bunch of senior players out. We were a pretty established team. And Bob playing his first game. He didn't actually kick the sealer, but he kicked the goal before the sealer and played a really important role. But skinny is absolutely the appropriate word for Bob Murphy on that day.
Well, we're running highlights over this, not of Bob's debut, but your 6 goals.
Yes, that'd be fantastic.
And the rumour is that you brought Bob over just so that this 6-goal discussion can come up a lot more.
Is that what's running around the club?
Yeah,
at the moment?
I don't want to say who, but
yeah. Well, it's hard to argue with that. Bob's doing a good job, but the primary purpose is him so that we could rehash this remarkable achievement.
Well, the peak of your career. Thank you, Garlo.
I don't know about that, but okay.
Thank you, Oz, for joining today, and sit back, enjoy this chat with Bob Murphy and Peter Bell and Ryan Daniels before we return live to the Doig Medal count to crown our winner.
Take a seat next to me on the love seat, Bob. It's very cosy.
Ryan,
how you
just
going?
sorting you out
Afternoon,
here, guys.
everyone.
If you ever need a drink, it's right there.
Thank you.
This is a bit like our office chair, actually. You and I sit there with our laptops,
Well, but it swings.
making the moves for the Dockers.
Mine just creaked, so that's not a good sound. The lunch was good. Let's start with you, Peter, because we're talking about stories in sport that maybe come from the unexpected or inspire. And yours is quite incredible. It started in a country town it started in South Korea and led to a country town of Kojonup. Can you just elaborate a little bit for us on your journey at the start and how the hell you ended up as a Hall of Famer in the Australian football?
Well, I ask myself that question pretty regularly, Ryan, and when I saw that the theme of today's luncheon was the power of sport, I thought, well, let's take a kid born in Korea, of a Korean mother, an Irish, Scottish, American father, and then give him 14 years playing the Indigenous game of Australian rules football, retire in 2008 after somehow making his way into the Hall of Fame, and then spend another 14 years working in football. If that's not the poster child for the power of sport, I don't know what is, really, as far as our sport's concerned. And thank you.
Well, it almost makes me wonder why we went with you first and me second.
Well, I was going to get to you, Bob. A skinny kid from Warragul, is that right?
Well, I wasn't always skinny, Pete. I've sort of trimmed up a little bit since WA, but yeah, no, it's a hell of a story, yours, but so good to be here.
Pete, that kind of path, it's now you can sit back and go, geez, it was all fantastic, we got there, but I'm sure there were some difficulties along the way that you had to overcome.
Yeah, very much so, particularly early in my life, growing up in a very small country town in the early to mid-80s. There were some challenges, so look, times have changed, thankfully, but you know as I was the only Asian person I knew until I went to boarding school at 15. So I literally had not really come across another person who looked a little bit like me until I was 15 years of age. And during those times, people would understand that attitudes could be a little bit different. So, I copped a fair bit for that, which was tough as a little boy. But sport gave me, which is not right, by the way, and things have changed as well, but it gave me an opportunity for acceptance initially, but at its best, sport then allows belonging and meaning in lives, particularly in my experience, in country towns, which often that is the social component, that's the fabric of the town, out of the local football and netball and whatever the case may be. And certainly that was the case where I grew up in Kojonup. So I've got a lot to be thankful for with sport, and particularly football, for the opportunities that it's given me, but also the lessons that I've learnt, which I'm happy to touch on as well. Perhaps after Bob's given you a little bit of a snapshot.
Yeah, Bob, I sort of learned a little bit about you when I was researching for this today. The son of a former priest and a nun from a sleepy little Warrigal town, is that right?
That is right, yeah. I am the son of a preacher man. I'll keep you all in my prayers this evening. They are, former. That's probably an important sort of just emphasis. They're not currently still practicing. They still go to church, so for all the mix out there. But aside from that, truthfully, quite different to Peter. Upbringing was quite orthodox, really. A football-mad family, a pretty typical Australian country town, 15,000 people in Warrigal, very much centred around sport, football being the sort of, the biggest ticket in town. But it really, the calendar of the year just ran to the beat of sport, whether it was netball or the cricket season in summer, tennis during the week, football in the winter months, and it would be where people would congregate, and I was very much a typical young kid, Australian kid, of going to the local football. You play juniors in the morning, and then be the boundary umpire for the reserves to get a pie and Coke. That was what you got paid for. Help with the scoreboard for the seniors, and if you weren't helping with the scoreboard, you would follow Butch Hemming, who was the local full forward, big burly fella, charismatic, hairy shoulders, and we would sort of follow Butch Hemming from one goal square to the other and sort of tease him, cheer for him. Just sort of, we were Butch Hemming fans.
Big Butch,
that was sort of, quite typical of that time.
I think every country team has a Butch Hemming, don't they? Every single one. So yeah, a normal upbringing in your mind, but you're not normal, are you, Bob? Because
no, he's not. Having worked with him for the past year, not at all.
It's just going to turn into a performance review pretty quickly.
I say this in the nicest possible way, but there's a lot of talk about football. There's a lot of playing of football. You seem to see things in a slightly different way, almost in a spiritual way, and sometimes when you speak, people can get lost in your words. Where does that love of the game come from? Is it from Warrigal? Was it somewhere else that was lit? Is it Butch?
No, I don't think Butch can lay claim to that. Honestly, and I don't want to overreach here, but you touched on it before. Came from a family where spirituality was quite an important part of our life, and going to church every Sunday was just part of the ritual, and Saturday was football. But I'm not much of a church-going fella these days, but as I sort of sit here as a 40-year-old man, I think the things that I loved about that experience, storytelling, symbolism, community, looking after one another, but ceremony, those things that I love, and I don't love everything about the church, I don't want to go into that one too deeply today, but those things that I grew up with and loved about that community is what draws me to football. That those things of being a part of a community, being part of a cause, the symbolism and the ceremony of a debutant or a jumper ceremony or a round one battle and an us against them, that stuff that's the juice for me.
While you were preparing for that answer, the word that I was thinking of was going to be spirituality, and Bob's been here for a year, but it shouldn't be underestimated that what many believe, and certainly I believe, that intangible aspect of a high-performing team lays somewhere in that definition of what their spirit is. What is that bond, that connection between the key participants within that team, organisation, and all of those things that you were talking about, Bob, are really important. Particularly, I think the younger generation really enjoy that storytelling and imagery and those sorts of things. I feel that they really want to belong to something. They want to stand for something together. and it's really important to them. So, and Bob's a real leader for that within our footy department and club.
Not to pump your tyres up again, Bob, but I think when people saw that you'd been hired by Fremantle, I think it was like, oh yeah, they got another good one. That's what Fremantle are doing right now. They're bringing in people who can add something a little different. And we've seen you from time to time walking laps with players, just having chats, both the men's team and the women's team. So
you should be in the office at that stage.
Well, I was
pumping out
just
some
about to
spreadsheets.
say,
So let's get on to that part of the performance review.
Let's not overcorrect.
Has anyone seen Bob? Oh, he's walking
There's
laps
no,
again.
there's no incense burning. There's no dream catchers. There's no hacky sacks in the office. It's
you've got at
mostly
least one
emails.
hacky sack. Don't
It's
lie.
mostly emails and compliance and all of those things. So let's just keep it in check.
Pete, the Executive General Manager of Football, it's quite a title. For those who are wondering, what do you do other than make sure that this team turns up?
Look for Bob, primarily. Where the hell is he? No, that's... look, it's a sort of a leadership role within all components of the AFL and AFLW football program. So whether that's coaching, administration, players, high performance, medical, recruiting, it's having an oversight on all of those areas and hoping that everything's running smoothly. Mm-hmm. It's a great job. There's a lot on, and certainly there's moments where you're preparing for a normal week, and it doesn't take much in this role for one thing can then consume you for 3 or 4 days. It's the nature of people businesses, I suppose. People are complicated and things happen in their lives, and particularly when players are concerned, there's a lot of stakeholders and there's a lot of processes that you have to work through to support, sometimes to minimise damage. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot to get through, but no day, hopefully you found this too, Bob, no day is exactly the same as any other day when you work in football, for the reasons I've just articulated.
You had a really good media career going. You could have kept going with that.
That's generous, but I'll take it.
It was outstanding.
I would have gone with struggling. But, yeah.
and a very solid backing in business as well. You didn't need to do this, but I've noticed that Aaron Sandland's back at the club, Josh Carr, Tendai Mzungu, obviously Justin Longmuir coaching. What pulled you back to Fremantle? Was it a sense of somehow giving back and getting this club where you think it can go?
Football's addictive, and then I had a brief hiatus from the game post-retirement, but once you get reintroduced, it is all-consuming and can be overpowering to the point where it's a life force of its own, and so that drew me back in, and I'm sure some of those names as well, and some of them are former Fremantle players, but as evidenced by the guy sitting next to me as well, we're after bringing in the right people into our organisation who are driven, who want to achieve something together. So whether they're former Fremantle players or Matthew Boyd or Joel Corey, Bob Murphy in footy ops, we'll continue to look to improve our organisation and our club.
Now, Bob, I suppose one of the memories that stand out for anybody when they say Bob Murphy is 2016, right? The grand final moment when, you're probably having the best and worst day of your life at the same time, and Bevo calls you up on the stage and you get that medal. Can you just give us some insight into that moment? And did you know it was coming? How did it sit?
I just sort of found myself daydreaming then to think, well, I wonder if JL would do the same thing if we're lucky enough in a month's time.
You want to get called up then
well,
as well?
I just think it'd be nice to have a pigeon pair.
Unusual for the footy ops manager to be called up, but...
Well, it would be certainly unorthodox, but you never know. Now, honestly, I've said that before. It was my best day in football and my worst day in football, and that's because, in one sense, that the euphoria and pride you have for your football club that you've spent 18 years at to climb the mountain and get over a 62-year premiership drought, those feelings of euphoria were real, but the heartbreak of not being in your footy boots and not being where you felt like where you should be, in your marrow, kind of that sort of a feeling. I suppose mixed emotions would be the briefest way you could describe it, but it was that's just the way it was for me. That was my lot.
See, when he says feel it in your marrow, that makes you feel something, right? This is what I was talking about. You're different. You're weird. In the best possible way. What got you to Fremantle? Why did you choose Fremantle? And by the way, if you hadn't been to Fremantle before, you are perfect for Fremantle, the city, the place. You ever been?
Well, you wouldn't move your family all the way over here to work for West Coast, would you? I mean, that's... It's not the first time I've used that line. It won't be the last.
It's very popular.
Just eating out of your hand in this room.
Might have even been in the job interview, I think. I threw that one in. Saw Pete's smile sort of run across his face. It was for a few reasons, to be honest. My media career was probably even less. It
Struggling.
Failed media career.
That's not true. That's not
niche.
true.
Niche.
Not true at all.
But I had done that for 4 years. And felt, to be honest, unfulfilled, to be honest. I spent most of my days having a good time and getting well paid, but there was something just inside me, in the marrow again, that felt a little bit unfulfilled. And it was just the right time for our family as well. We'd lived, my wife and I, we've been in Melbourne for 20 years. And when we sort of thought about what we need as a family and what we wanted was we wanted a family adventure, and I desperately wanted to get back into football. And Fremantle for us was the perfect fit. The fact that it's got working class roots, it's longing for something that appeals to me. And even from afar, I could tell in the last few years what the club was building and the type of people that they were attracting, and that was something that was just too good to resist. And don't worry, there's been some moments where I've felt a little bit overwhelmed by the job. I've never led on to the boss, but...
You didn't have to.
But it's almost been a year since we've been here, and it's might be the best decision we've ever made as a family. We absolutely love it here, love living in South Fremantle, very much feel a part of the Purple Gang.
You joked about Fremantle and Bob, but he lives pretty much in the centre of South Fremantle. It is perfect. And don't take it personally when Bob's talking about unfulfilling media careers, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm thinking
Some
about
people are suited to it, mate. Some people can make a go of it. So
it's just,
I'm not saying you are, in particular are soulless. I'm just saying for me it had a certain soulless element.
Peter,
to
can
it.
I have a job in the football department? I'm just kidding, Moreno. I love my work.
Yeah. Can you walk laps?
I could do laps with Bob. The AFLW season, Bob, is right there. It's Saturday or Sunday you guys play?
Sunday
Against Brisbane. Big game. Massive.
Yeah, huge one.
What can we expect from the girls this year?
Well, you can expect a fierce, competitive and ultimately hungry group. This is really, there's a core group of players that we've had for a number of years, and I've only gotten to know them in the last 12 months, obviously, but fit, tough, train hard, and just the way they reacted to the preliminary final loss in the season just gone. Obviously, it's disappointing, but it was extremely raw, and I've lived through that a couple of times. So, to watch them sort of put the armour back on and put all their chips on the table again for another dash at it is, I find, quite inspiring. And we'll see how we go. But Brisbane first up is a huge challenge, and we've got a couple of key players who are out. But as they say, there's some opportunity there. So very much looking forward to seeing how we go.
Absolutely, and Pete, big month ahead, maybe. Hopefully 4 more games. Flag mantle, the Purple Army, everybody's up and about. Can this happen? Is it possible?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, it's possible. We're really excited, Ryan, and we're embracing all of the experience that playing finals opportunity presents. It's really gratifying to be able to come to work each day and see young people thrive and flourish. The best part of the job that I do, really small moments like when you ring a player's mum or dad and tell them, hey, look, your son or your daughter's about to play their first game, and you get tears, you get euphoria. That's exceptional and more reward than one person should really get, given that I get to do it reasonably regularly. Ringing Andy Brayshaw actually came into my office and saying, "Hey mate, you're all Australian, congratulations," and seeing that reaction, roaring in front of you, and then backing it up with, "You're also been voted the AFLPA most valuable player."
That's pretty good.
So those moments are magic. The flip side is you get the other end of the spectrum, where you've got to say to a player whose dream is to be on an AFL list and play AFL football that, sorry, it's no longer going to be here at this club, and seeing that spirit be crushed. And look, I've experienced it as well. We're talking backstage, that exactly happened to me at the end of 1995. So there's empathy there, but that's really tough. But getting back to the question about the excitement ahead, it's brilliant for all Fremantle fans and members and sponsors, and we're going to really enjoy it, and we're going to go in there confident and give it a really big swing, and who knows where it might end.
Fantastic. Can we thank Peter Bell and Bob Murphy? Some wonderful insight there into what's ahead for Fremantle, both AFL and AFLW. Thanks, gents.